It would probably, and it's already on my wall. It's a photo I took of the fifth hole at Bandon Dunes. It was sunrise, and it was foggy, misty morning, and the fog was kind of rolling up the bank. It was, yeah, it was, yeah, really nice. Yeah, I mean, I took it about 4 or 5 years ago, but it's still to this day, I think is my favorite shot.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to a very special edition of the Links Golf Club podcast called Building LinksDAO. It's a series where we dissect what makes great golf clubs. We're building the best golf club of the future together here at LinksDAO, and that means understanding what actually makes a golf club great. It's not just the course, but the culture, the experience, and yes, the beauty. And so today we're going to dig into that last piece. What makes a golf course beautiful? And as I sat and thought who I wanted to talk to for this episode, I could not think of anyone better positioned to have this conversation than Evan Schiller. He's one of the premier golf course photographers in the world. He's captured over 600 championship courses from Pebble Beach to Augusta, the old course at St. Andrews. He has one of the best golf Instagram accounts around, Evan Schiller Photography. He's a former PGA professional. He competed in the US Open, and now his photographs are seen in Golf Digest, Links Magazine, Golf Magazine, clubhouses around the world, office walls around the world. You are going to love this episode. I had a blast talking to Evan. I could have talked to him for hours, but you are really going to enjoy what he has to say about what makes a golf course beautiful, how to photograph golf courses. He even gets into some gear. You're going to love it. So let's meet Evan. So Evan, thank you so much for taking the time. Really, really excited to talk to you. Before we started talking, I was just scrolling through your Instagram, and it's just beautiful picture after beautiful picture. And in a world in which like my social media feeds are just destroyed, like the algorithms are terrible, it's just really nice to have a place that I can go and just like look at golf courses. Let's talk a little bit about just sort of your journey. How did you get into, I understand that you started in competitive golf. You got to
Did
photography. Sort of tell us how you got into photography, golf photography.
My mother was a really good photographer. She was never professional, and my father was a kind of a high-end amateur filmmaker.
Hmm.
Like they didn't really have video back then, and I was playing a lot of tournament golf and wasn't really taking any photos. But I remember when I was pretty young, my mother had bought me this little Instamatic camera, and I would take it on trips and take pictures of a bunch of stuff. And my mother would comment that these pictures are pretty good for a little squirt, right? And so I
What a
started.
backhanded compliment.
Yeah, I know. Thanks, mom.
Yeah.
And I was traveling all these really great places, playing tournament golf, and I some people have probably heard this or that I played the California Open in at the on the Dinah Shore course. It's called something else now at Mission Hills, and we went over afterwards to go play the stadium course at PGA West, which had just opened, and we came down the ninth hole, and there's this beautiful scene of this lake and Pete Dye's railroad ties, and it was this perfect reflection in the lake, and the hole is actually called Reflection. So I didn't know, didn't have phones then. I didn't have a camera, but the image was etched in my, you know, my mind or my memory, whatever. I
Hmm.
mean, to this day, I have a really clear picture of it. So I went home and bought a camera. I said, "Mom, I need a camera." So she bought me this Instamatic, then not Instant, this Minolta film camera. And it was, had to load the film, and it was negative, it was negative film. It wasn't even, transparencies, which I eventually transitioned into. And so just started taking the camera with me and taking photos of golf courses, guys I play with. And then I would bring them home, and I bought these little cheap little plastic frames, and I'd shove them in there and hang them on my wall. So my room and my house was lined with little golf 8x12 golf photos and pennants. All different football, basketball, hockey pennant. That was it. That was my room. And a couple fish tanks.
Mm-hmm.
That was my room. And
So,
then, one thing led to another.
mhm.
I started working as an assistant at Quaker Ridge, assistant golf pro at Quaker Ridge, and then at Westchester, and just I was taking pictures of the golf courses. And when I was at Westchester, uh, my buddy I was working with there, Tom Patrick, said, we should put some of these in the pro shop and sell them. And I laughed, right? I thought that was funny, right? Yeah, right. Who's gonna buy these? Um, so long story short, we put some up during the Buick Classic, which was used to be there. And I sold a few, and that was pretty much it, off and running. And then I did it in a couple other clubs in the area, and here we are 20, whatever, years later, 25 years later, whatever it was. So that's the, short version, how it kind of got started.
Yeah, you almost sound surprised that like your friend. You said you laughed when your friend was like, "Hey, we should sell these." Like, you didn't think they were good, or you didn't think that people would care, or why were you surprised?
Uh, you know, I mean, I didn't think they were that. I mean, they were okay. I mean, I look back at them now, and they're like, yeah, I was right. They weren't very good. But at the time, for me at the time, and I think because I knew people at the club, they bought them. Um, it was it was because they knew me. Maybe they bought it, but I just I didn't think they were very good.
Hmm.
That's all. And they're like, who's gonna buy my photos? Really? So,
Sure. I mean, did you obviously you were a great golfer, right? I don't know if you were professional. You played in great tournaments. Did
yeah.
was it less obvious to you that you had talent in photography than it was golf growing up, or like what was it like? When did you realize you were good at golf versus what was like the realization that you were good at photography?
Well, probably, there was a certain aspect of, I mean, I was golf, relatively speaking, but compared to what I wanted to do, like playing a tour, I wasn't good enough. Well, at least I didn't think I was.
Mm-hmm.
Probably if I, had a different view of myself, I might have ended up differently. But um, so it just, I was just taking photos for kicks, and I never really considered, never thought about this as a profession. Never. Um, it really didn't cross my mind. I was just doing it for fun. And, when somebody suggested sell them, I was like, ooh, wait a second. Now it's like somebody's going to really look at these things, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of being on my wall where I'm looking at them, now it's like all of a sudden in a pro shop where a lot of people are looking at them. Oh my God.
So how has your relationship with golf changed? Kind of behind the lens now. I mean, I'm sure you still play golf, but has your relationship with golf changed being on the other side of the camera?
So my wife and I are in the process of putting together a book that we're gonna be published early 2027. But so every night we sit down and she'll say, "What about this course?" Whether because she's doing most of the writing, but I feed her the information and content. And one of the things that occurred to me is I said, I grew up in the north in Westchester County, and there's so many great golf courses around there. There's Westchester, Wingfoot, Quaker Ridge, on Long Island, there's Sleepy Hollow, on Long Island, there's, Bethpage and National Golf Links and Shinnecock. And I played them all
Mhm.
growing up, in amateur golf and then some professional. And I said to her, I grew up playing all these great golf courses, and I don't think I really appreciated them. I don't appreciate the architecture, who designed it. I don't know if I could have ever told you.
Mhm.
And then just appreciating where they, the history of them, where they stood, the great events they made. I knew Wingfoot was good and I knew Quaker Ridge. I don't think I truly appreciated it. It wasn't until now that I've started, when I've photographed it, I've learned more about the history of these places, started to appreciate the architecture, architect, because a lot of these places have done renovations, restorations, and so I've come in, photographed them afterwards, and so I was really interested to learn about the history of these places, and a lot of these I mean, a lot of them are golden age golf courses, golden age architects from McDonald, Rayner to Tillinghast to CB McDonald to Alistair McKenzie, all these great golf course architects, had to put their stamp on some golf course in the mid area. So I think now that I've put golf courses, I just appreciate, when I'm on a golf course, I see it differently, appreciate the architecture, different types of architecture and what they had in mind. And I really keep that in mind when I'm shooting a golf course and playing it. I just have the architect or what the architect intended much more in mind now.
And you've, I think, at least on the website, I think there was something like 600 plus, maybe even more at this point. But are there any that even just standing on property sort of give you chills or just really excite you to be at? We talked about, kind of where you are now. It's one of your favorite places in the world. But are there any properties that even if you've been back to, they just, now that you appreciate all the things you just described, that they really stand out to you?
There's not a lot of courses that I go back to a lot.
Hmm.
But, a couple that come to mind are Fisher's Island, um, and the Creek Club on Long Island. I was just really loved. I mean, I played the Creek growing up, and I never got it. I never got that there's a great Stephen McDonald, Rayner McDonald design, and just but I think it would took Gil Hansen restoration to like, whoa, okay, this place is amazing. So, I photographed it a couple years ago, and I went back like think 3 times, and every time I drove through the gates, I was excited to see this place. Um, yeah, so that was one of them. I mean, I'm always excited to go back to Pebble. It's just I mean, and that's one place I go back to a lot, or Abandoned Dunes, and every time I drive in Abandoned Dunes, it's really exciting.
Hmm.
Um, So yeah, there's a handful, but I don't go back to a lot of it. I don't go back to courses a ton. I go to photograph it or maybe play it, but I'm heading to Ireland in the fall. Haven't been there in a while, so there's a few courses that it's like I'm really looking forward to getting to the first time or even going back.
Hmm.
Um, I'm going down Old Head, and it's just like when you drive in there, you drive through this big stone structure and across this little, I don't know what you call it, jetty area. It really is thrilling.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fantastic trip. And as someone who consumes your content, I'm excited.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, been there.
that's great. Let's talk a little bit about sort of how you do what you do.
Mm.
When you
Yeah.
show up on a course, walk me through, like, let's get into the details of just sort of what's the first thing you do, what's your process like, what does it look like for you to show up at a golf course and begin shooting it?
It seems like every week I have a couple of calls with upcoming shoots. And well, I'll kind of take you through like if a golf course contacts me, like, Ocean Forest. We usually have a conversation back and forth, find out what they want, when they want to do it, when's the ideal time. And I always emphasize you need to talk to the golf course superintendent because they are out there every day. They have the hands on the pulse as to when's the golf course going to be its best condition? Do they have any maintenance practices going on, which you want to avoid? Like, for instance, I'll take this week, for instance, at Ocean Forest in the winter, they do a complete overseed with ryegrass, right? And so now that they're coming into the warmer weather, they're transitioning from rye to Bermuda. So, they said, good thing you didn't, like it looks really, the Bermuda, like 3 weeks ago, was still dormant, somewhat dormant because it hadn't really gotten hot. But the rye was kind of, it wasn't primo,
Hmm.
right? So you gotta, get like whereas in the winter, like March or something, they were completely overseeded with rye, looked beautiful. So certain times of the year where a golf course looks its best and when it may not. So it's always important to find out when that is and, what schedules at golf. So once, let's say, the dates are set.
One follow up to that, did you learn that lesson the hard way? Like, was there a time that you, like, maybe early in your career, you're like, yeah, I'll show up, and then it's just like they just, they just sanded the greens, or they just punched the
Yeah.
greens, or
No,
something like that?
so, with years of experience, I know what
Yeah,
question to ask now. Okay,
sure.
are they, doing any maintenance practices, like, are they aerating? Because generally when they aerate, they top dress. Are they spraying? Because, if they're spraying, lots of times when they run the sprayer down the fairway, the sprayer, because of the weight, makes tracks or little impressions that you'll see for days. And if you get up in the air a little bit with a drone, you see those tracks. They spraying greens or because sometimes, if they spray greens and tees with, depending on what they're using, has a little dye in it. So it turns it this little kind of bluish green,
Hmm.
which they're doing here, I think tomorrow, but after I'm gone. So it's important to, yeah, I've learned this the hard way, but over time, just learning what the superintendents do, what they like, what they don't like. So just getting to know their work and appreciating what they do is important to timing. Yeah. So yeah, in answer to your question, I've learned the hard way. Um, so that's why I always like to have a conversation with the superintendent. Like I go next week, I go to Dallas and then back to home. And originally I'm shooting the Montclair Golf Club in New Jersey, and originally doing May, and I talked to the superintendent. And now the club set it up. I think it was the marketing or the GM, which was now not there. So I spoke to the superintendent, and he says, I know originally May, but I don't think the course is going to be ready. I said, is there some fescue out there? He goes, yeah. I said, well, knowing the Northeast, if there's fescue, it really doesn't look good until mid-June or July, where it gets that golden brown. So, you know, so we switched it to June. So having these conversations with the superintendent ahead of time is really important. And so once I get there, I usually will meet with the superintendent, but I also will scout the golf course. I'll drive around the whole course. If I can't play it, I'll drive. But when I drive, I've got this little app, Sunseeker app. So I go to every hole and I'll go on the green and I'll hold up the little Sunseeker, which shows me where the sun's going to be at certain times of the day. So I know, okay, well, I want to shoot this hole at 6:30 a.m. And then in the afternoon, well, maybe it's not as good in the afternoon. So I'll shoot this one in the morning and this one in the afternoon. And, sometimes it changes once you get out there, but I do a full scout of the golf course to get a sense of, what I want to shoot, where I want to shoot, learning my way around. So, if there's certain holes I can shoot that are close by, they don't have to drive all over the place. Um, so that's, the first thing I do. And I have, I get a scorecard. I could show you a picture where I'll write on the scorecard all these little notes, like I'll put AM, PM, put the time I think I want to shoot it. And if I need a pin moved, because like at the time I want to shoot it, the pin's in a certain place that's going to be in the shade versus the sun. So I'll ask the superintendent, you cut the pin over here for the morning. And then, I said, well, can you cut it over here for the afternoon? And so I, I try to, like, be reasonable, but I
Hmm.
kind of explain to him why.
Yeah.
And then, once I'm done scouting or shooting, I'll either text or, email this or talk to the superintendent and say, here's what I'm doing. I would like to do in the morning. Is this doable? Right. Because so they can coordinate their work. For instance, like this morning, I told Lucas, the superintendent, I gave him a list of holes. And I like to do them where they're close by each other. So, like I said, I'll be on 14th or 18th this morning. So he sends his guys to all the other holes. And then yesterday morning, I gave him a few holes. They're all kind of in the same section. It was like 5 and 13 and 12 and 4. And, so he sends his guys to the other side of the course and stays off. So I have it to myself and his guys aren't driving all over the place, making tracks in the dew and getting my photos. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of coordinating.
Yeah. But it sounds, I mean, I would never, and that's why we're talking, right? I would have
It,
never have known how critical the relationship is with the superintendent.
yeah, it really is.
Because my assumption is, yeah, you're talking to someone in marketing, you're talking to the GM, and then you show up. And, as someone who, like, we've recently, started trying to get better at drone photography at our courses, and,
Yeah.
trying to shoot some more video content. And it's really hard because everything you do in the beginning sucks. Like, back to your early thing, it's like, it's not good. And but a lot of that comes down to planning, right? It's like, even in your head, I was watching this. I think it was a YouTube short or something, and or maybe it was an interview with Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, the film directors. And Tarantino was explaining that, like, every movie he's ever done, he can close his eyes and he can watch the movie in his head, and he knows exactly what it's going to be like.
Yep.
Um, and so, but as far as a superintendent is concerned, like, that vision rests upon obviously certain conditions that have to be true. You can't edit those. You can't really recreate those. You can't control the sun. You can't control the grass.
Right.
But you have to set yourself up for success. So, what gear are you using these days? You mentioned drones. How has that changed over the years? You talked a little bit about some of your early cameras, but what do you take? What equipment do you take to the golf course, and what do you shoot with?
Yeah. I just had breakfast with the guy who's the head of creative here for Sea Island, and we're just talking about. He asked me the most. He goes, so what did you start shooting with, and where are you now? So right now, the drone I'm using is a Sony AirPeak, which I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with, but you know, this is the first drone that they came out with, I think 3 years ago, about 3 years ago, maybe a little less. Um, it's a big drone that can carry a full frame DSLR. So
Interesting.
I'm using that. There's a Grimsey gimbal that holds a Sony A7R5, which is a full frame DSLR
Uh huh.
camera. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm using. And I have four different lenses that I use with it. I have an 80 millimeter, I have a 50, 35, and a 24, which I use. And, it takes a lot more to, set up because, with like, I used to use the Inspire before this Inspire 2, and basically, you take it out, you push the button, the landing gear go down, and then you put the gimbal, it's a fixed camera. You could change lenses,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, and it had the gimbal, which just balance. With this one, I have to balance the gimbal every time.
Mm.
I put the camera on, I gotta lock it, I gotta, I balance the gimbal every time, every morning, every afternoon. And if I change lenses, I have to keep balance the gimbal again. Now, within the app that it comes with, there's presets for cameras and lenses, but you still got to balance the gimbal because
But the
it's
quality's worth it to you. I mean, it's a lot better, I assume.
just yeah. Well, you're shooting, full frame DSLR. The files are like 100, the TIFF files are 175 megabytes versus, and the quality, like I could shoot, like this morning I shot, it was pretty low light or sunrise. And you just look at the quality is just really good. They're sharp. Whereas when I was shooting with the Inspire, you couldn't shoot in low light. It was really hard.
Got.
You could, but they were all grainy. And um, so it's yes. To
Are
answer
you
your question.
using? Are you doing video? My assumption is you're watching for the shot you want, and then you're snapping that shot. You're not editing a frame out of a video that you've taken of a course. Do you do both, or, like, what does that look like?
Well, if you edit a frame out of a video, well, first of all, when you shoot video, each frame is blurred slightly. I mean,
Mhm.
which for video, so it looks smooth. And then, you're not going to get the same quality of image or size of image. Each one of these is stills that you know, individually.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, like this morning, you're up early and for the sun to come up, and you're sitting there waiting, and as soon as this, gets up high enough, bam, you're off to the races.
It kind of sounds like everybody I've talked to played, especially like junior golf or amateur golf growing up. They're like, "What's one word to describe what that was like?" And they're like, "Waiting." You're just waiting a lot, and it sounds like golf photography is pretty similar. Like, you're probably just waiting for something to happen a lot.
Yeah,
Uh,
you are, like the sunrise here is 6:21, I think. Um, but in the mornings here, it's pretty humid. So in the morning there's some, haze, or yesterday was some fog, which was really cool, but there's some clouds on the horizon. So you got to wait for the sun to come up through those clouds, which ends up being, like 6:45, like maybe half an hour later. But you never know, so you got to sit and wait. And there was some clouds on the horizon, so the sun would come out, then would go away. So you just, but once the sun's out, the window to shoot is pretty small,
Mm-hmm.
which comes back to my preparation and my scouting. Because when I scout, I I kind of got a plan. Okay, I'm going to go to this hole first, then this one, then this one, and this one. And it's a guess, but it's a pretty good guess based on using my Sunseeker and, kind of a bunch of years of experience. Like this morning, I started on 18th hole, which is right by the water. Because, as soon as that sun comes up, it hits that hole, and it's like, wow. And then, the 17th hole again is also right kind of on the water. But then there's a couple holes inland where it takes the sun a little longer to come up over the trees. So I kind of, you got to plan. I plan my, you know, my attack, like what holes I'm going to do when.
Yeah. And I mean, so you've described a tremendous amount of work that goes into capturing these moments. And again, like I cannot impress upon people enough to go look at your Instagram feed and just see these photos. And chances are, if you're looking at a photo of a great club, chances are it probably came from you. I mean, you do such a great job. We
Yeah.
know how much time that takes and how much preparation. There's so many variables. So I guess kind of my next line of questions are kind of centered around like, why is it worth it? You know what I mean? So like, I think where I'll start is kind of what defines the beauty of a golf course. Cause like we're trying to get this essence of like, there's certain things that are under a club's control. Obviously the on course experience is really important, but a lot of people's interaction with a golf club comes through photography or it comes through video. And if that's the only chance that they have to sort of wonder and hope and desire to go to a place, then the pictures have to be awesome. But like, let's start with what kind of defines a beautiful golf course in your mind?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, wow. Yeah, it's a really good question. So I'll just start with this. And not all the time, but I've often heard, people say, well, I was at that course. It didn't look like that. And I thought about this for a minute, and I said, yeah, well, you weren't out there at 6 o'clock in the morning. No offense, because most people are not playing at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're playing at, maybe 8 or 9, or maybe,
Mm-hmm.
so, you're not out there right when that sun comes up. And I was intentional about being out there so I could get this photo. So it may not look
Mm-hmm.
like that. The other thing is, it's like I kind of liken it. If you go in a bathroom in a low lit bathroom, right? And you look in the mirror. Then you go in a bathroom and there's like really bright lights. Looks a little different
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you look in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing on a golf course. In the middle of the early morning, late when the sun is low, a lot of golf courses can look really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it gets high, it shows a lot more. You see, you may see imperfections. You may see spots that are not. And the superintendent may see differently because that's his job. But um, so there's a lot of things that go into the beauty of a golf course. And, I've been on what you might consider mundane golf courses, but if you capture them in the right light or with some dramatic skies, it looks great.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, like I'll take for instance this place this week, Ocean Forest, where I was just talking with a caddy, and he goes, this place is ranked 163rd in the country. And he said, there's not 162 courses that are better than this place. And, I mean, I agree with him.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about this place, like, yeah, I mean, is it top 20? Probably, no, no, but there's a lot of things here that are really make it a beautiful place. The setting, it's right on, ocean forest. There's some holes that run along the water, and there's some holes that run along the rivers are in the ocean, and then you kind of go inland, and it goes through a forest, but there's also marshy areas. And then there's like some places where there's some, and so a lot of it's, yeah, the design. how it works with the land, but also the setting. The setting is, like I said, I'm going to Ireland in September. People oftentimes, I remember my brother watching what was called the British Open, now it's called the Open. He goes, ugh, what kind of golf course is that? There's no trees, right? And, from afar, it may look like that. And, but if you get out there early in the morning and the sun's low and you see the bumps and humps and bumps, it's like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Um, and there's one more story. So, yeah, I guess there's a lot of things that go on. I was in Hawaii one time doing a book, and the editor was there with me, and we got up early and before the sun, it was for it to come over the mountain. And I could see he was perplexed as to why are we out here? Right? Why are we out here this early? It's dark. Because I wanted to get it as soon as the sun came over the mountain. And as soon as the sun came over the mountain, it's like on the lights. And he looked at it and he goes, oh,
Hmm.
now I get it. And I said, and after we were done the shoot, I came back to that spot. I said, look at it now. He goes, no, it's nowhere near the same. He said, yeah.
Yeah. And
So
so
the light can make a huge difference.
for sure. And like you said, I mean, people who are going to a golf course are seeing it all throughout the day, right? Like you're capturing this moment in time. And so I could see how, like, I had an experience recently. I went to a golf course that I'd always wanted to play, and I'd only experienced it through video, other people's stories, and photographs.
Yeah.
And I was kind of a little disappointed when I got there a
Yeah.
little bit. We started on a different hole. We didn't start on one. It was a shotgun start. I didn't get a feel of the course. But once I wrapped back around and we played it in the afternoon and I'd played all the holes and I'd finally played them sort of all in order, and it just completely changed now it's one of my favorite golf courses I've ever played. So it's crazy. Like so much about, great golf clubs again is most of them are pretty exclusive, not all of them, right? Most of them you're probably never going to set foot on, but most people then experience that through media. And then if they ever have a chance to go, depending on the time of day or the weather, those things can change, right? Are there any patterns that you see in like beautiful golf courses? You've been to so many of them that whether it's certain features or if it's trees or no trees or the setting, like are there not that this is a formula, right? But if you could kind of like think about all the golf courses you've been to, are there certain patterns that you can recognize or that stand out to you?
Well, there seems to be a wave, I should say, or a pattern, a trend towards building golf courses in the sand. You look where the golf courses are being built now, a lot of them, not all of them, in like Nebraska,
Hmm.
in like the sand hills of South Carolina, around Aiken. All
Hmm.
these golf courses, they're all sand, it's all sandy soil.
Hmm.
Florida, sandy soil. Texas,
Hmm.
not so much as Texas, but a lot of golf courses being built um, in those kind of, you know, that kind of terrain. So, I mean, there's lots of reasons for it, but I think there's a certain pull, there's a certain beauty about those places that's drawing people that they're really beginning to appreciate.
Sure. And like you said, trends, I mean, that I imagine
Yeah,
that changes over time, right? Like a taste of every sort of generation of architects and generation of golfer.
right.
They're looking. There was a fascinating debate this week on Twitter. Somebody posted side by side Oakmont, 50 years ago and Oakmont now, and it just said Mont because there's no trees anymore. But the original intention of that golf course was to basically be a links golf course in the middle of Pennsylvania, and it didn't have trees when it was built, right? The trees grew over time and they cut them all out. And so that stuff probably does change. I guess how kind of the question I'm going for here is like, is it possible to have a beautiful golf course like on an ugly piece of land, right? Like architects talk about, rightly so, how important the property is, right? Like the property is going to define so much about what that golf course can be, the natural setting. Like obviously Pebble Beach is prettier or Cypress Point is prettier than my golf course down the street, because it's at a beautiful landscape. But is it possible to, I don't want to say like manufacture beauty in a golf course, but are there golf courses that come to mind to you that maybe are a little bit underrated or in quote unquote worse locations, but still stand out to you to have a beauty to them?
Yeah. There's a couple of them, but they did. I mean, a couple of places I'm thinking about, they did move a lot of. Now, I don't know what you call artificial because, you know, every golf course they move dirt.
Sure.
And, sometimes I'll post photos or somebody said it looks so manufactured. I said, well, Augusta's manufactured. I mean, you see some of the slopes in those greens, they weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, they moved a lot of dirt to make the slopes, and they have summer systems, right, to control the temperature, the moisture. They have the moisture, and they have all these agronomy practices. So where is it? Draw a line where it's not manufactured. One of the places I think of, I mean, look at the old course, St. Andrews, how flat it is, and I remember when I first walked out there, I went, "Oh,
Like, how am I going to take a picture of this? Right? Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's
this is like, are you kidding me? This is the old course that some consider the greatest golf course in the world.
mm-hmm.
I don't get it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's on a very small piece of land. It's very thin and narrow.
Mm-hmm.
And as I started to walk around, I went, okay, now I'm getting it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, with the bunkering and the greens, and but at first glance, you may not appreciate that the beauty of this place. I mean, it doesn't have a dramatic coastline. Although, there's holes by the water back there, and there's houses, and there's the hotel, and there's the town's kind of cool. And it's basically flat.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a real beauty to it.
Yeah, that's an
And
example of drone photography. I had a similar thing. You grow up watching the Open and you see St. Andrews and everything else, but I think the first time that I saw a really high resolution drone shot of St. Andrews and just noticed how undulating it is, and that kind of defined the word undulation for me. Like my brain came online for that. And that just shot wouldn't have been possible 50 years ago. Like you're watching standard def television and a square aspect ratio and it's grainy. And, now to be able to see a shot and just how crazy that land is, it's probably not for everyone. I'm sure it's the same, thing back to the Oakmont discussion. And there's people who hate links golf and there's people who hate trees and everything else. But it's really hard for me not to like feel something when I see a shot like that wouldn't have been possible with technology before. Are there other golf courses like that you think people appreciate more only because we have access to imagery that didn't exist before?
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, um, Trying to think of, there's it's a bit lesser known, but like in Florida, Florida is relatively flat. Now I realize they had to move dirt to do this, but Panther National and West and Palm Beach Gardens, there's a lot of undulation. I mean, obviously they had to move dirt to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, the way they did it, and I know some people they Florida it's manufactured, but you know, like it's still kind of cool, like with the way they did with the bunkering and the moving of the ground and moving of the dirt. There's a lot of movement to the ground. Um, yeah, I mean, if it's flat, it there's not a lot you can do about that unless you can move some dirt around
Mm-hmm.
to give it some definition.
Yeah. Is there are there any holes that are just impossible to take a bad shot of? Like or yeah, impossible to take a bad shot. Like even I could go out there and take a picture of. Like are there any holes that are just so beautiful that all the work that you put into it, you talked about the intentionality and the planning that you could just walk out there and it doesn't matter. Are there any holes that have that inherent beauty to them?
Yeah, well, the first one that comes to mind is seventh at Pebble.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just standing on a tee, you can take with your phone and it's gonna look good.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like even like from behind the 18th hole, like behind the green there, it's Pebble's pretty nice. And you know, um, Tom Doak once said to me, he goes, forgot exactly how he said it, but any hole that's along the water, you can you it automatically gets 10 bonus ranking points just because it's on the water.
Yeah.
So, any of those holes, I'm thinking abandoned dunes. They have 5 miles of coastline there, I think.
Hmm.
Any one of those holes along the water, you walk up there and take a photo, it's gonna be pretty good.
Totally. Are there any that are the opposite, that you stand there in person and you're like, this is a beautiful golf hole and you just can't do it justice? Like, are there any that are hard to shoot?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of them. There was, what was I recently trying to think of some a particular hole. Nothing's coming to mind. But, you know, sometimes the way the hole is oriented, like towards the sun,
Hmm.
and whether it has trees on it, there was a hole on a golf course actually in Naples
Hmm.
recently, and it was just I went to this hole every day, and there's a couple holes out there, and it was just like I don't know what to do with this thing
Hmm.
because the sun would rise behind the green, and there was a bunch of trees,
Hmm.
rise up, and then it would cast these big shadows, and by the time the sun got high enough, that didn't really look good. And then in the afternoon, the sun set right behind the tee, so it was like you're shooting straight down the sun. So I finally opted to go off to the way off to the side and do like a panoramic from the side of the hole. I could get the sun coming one way or the other. But it was, yeah. And then the weather was kind of funky at times. So um, sometimes it just depends on, the makeup of the hole, the orientation towards the sun. Like it just makes it more difficult.
Sure.
Like I was recently, a lot of holes go east west. And so they're into the sun or right behind the sun, which sometimes can make it challenging.
Yeah, they're back to the kind of, there are certain things just outside of your control. Let's talk a little bit about maybe the business culture side of it a little bit. I understand that, and obviously kind of one of the things we're trying to do in this series is obviously take a lot of learnings for us, right? And think about how we shape, our club. And, obviously we have two golf courses, but we also have a digital membership, and our members play a lot of golf at great golf courses and that sort of thing. But for a club who, is obviously going to reach out to you, but I think kind of my first question on this thread is, golf is one of the most photographed sports in the world, and a lot of that has to do with, you're playing on really pretty landscapes. But why do you think images have always really resonated with the game? Going back, you can see black and white photographs that are 130 years old, and people still look at them. Like, why do you think golf and photography are so intertwined?
Yeah. Well, if you look at every other sport, right? No disrespect to any of them. The field which they play on is pretty standard. You know, baseball. I mean, they're all a little. I mean, it's baseball stadiums are a little different, but the field is pretty much the same. Football, same thing. Stadiums are different. Fields the same.
Mm-hmm.
Hockey, same kind of thing. Tennis, a little different. There was a guy who just did a book on tennis courts, and I went, tennis courts? And then I started reading it. Wow, this is really interesting. He traveled all around the world taking pictures of different tennis courts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, they're still, the dimensions of a tennis court are standard, right? They're in different places, they have different surfaces. Each golf course is different, it's unique
Mm-hmm.
design, you know, where it is, by the water, parkland, links. So I think that's one thing. They're all really different. I think the other thing is one of the reasons that resonates is one, it if people see a photo of a course they've played, it resonates because it brings back some kind of memory.
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I made a par on that, or I went there for my, bachelor party, or, this is where I took my wife on our honeymoon, or
Mm-hmm.
I gotta get a photo of that hole because I made a hole in one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. Um, I don't know that taking pictures of a baseball diamond is not necessarily going to draw people to the game to come to the baseball. The same thing with the tennis court. Yeah. But a picture of a golf course. Yeah. I mean, people go to a baseball game because they like their teams, or they
Mm-hmm.
go to tennis because they're with their buddies, or or their spouse. But people go specifically. I don't know any sport where people take a specific trip just to do that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sport. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm sure there's some maybe horse, something horses or something like that. Because so these photos that people see entice them or draw them to go, wow, that place, I want to go there, play this place. Well, I've played all these different courses. I want to play this one, or I want to go to, Whistling Straits, or Pebble Beach, or I go to the, Caribbean, or I want to go, Scotland or Ireland. They're all unique. And, a lot of times I post a photo, I get comments all the times or DMs. And people will ask me, I'm going, I just saw the guy ask me, he goes, hey, we're going to US Open. We're driving from Michigan. Any recommendations you have where we can play there or along the way? The people are always looking for new places to play
Yeah.
or trips to. People say, I'm mad in this when I see a photo I posted. I'm adding this to my bucket list.
Yep.
Create my bucket list. Oops, you just spent me more. You just cost me more money with that one.
Yep.
So there's something about photos that really draw people to come play the course, brings back memories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they just appreciate the uniqueness and the beauty of, a really beautiful golf shot, whole hole.
Sure. Have
I don't,
you have you ever had a situation where one of your photographs, or can you think of an example, or one of your photographs really shaped someone's sort of feeling of a course, good or bad? Like I described earlier, I went to a golf course, I was a little bit let down. It took some, but good or bad, is there a time where someone told you like, hey, I saw your photograph of this course and it made me feel something differently than if I hadn't seen that golf course, or it changed my experience with that golf course?
yeah. I think I said to one guy said, it didn't look like that when I was there. No, um, yeah, I'm trying to think. The only thing that comes to mind is people seeing a photo and saying, boy, I got to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's great. Wow, I played that hole. I really love the photo, really captured it. Um, or, like last year, I went to, like a lot of times if a course does a renovation or a new course, they need imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Or like I went to East Lake last year,
Mm-hmm.
a year ago in June. And now the renovation they did wasn't complete, and the golf course was completely different than what it was. Andrew Green completely restored to the original Donna Ross, but they needed, even though it wasn't finished, they were putting up, they were putting up the infrastructure for the tour championship. You know, we need photos because we're going to get media requests. You know, so we need the photos for the media requests to show people, okay, here's what's changed. This is what's different about the golf course. Um, we just did a renovation or whatever course, and like we need to show people, here's what we did, and the course is reopening on this day, so that people know where they are, what's going on, and or reintroduce, like you said, reintroduce them to this golf course that's been, you know, hey, well, we just closed the course for 6 months, and here's why. Here's what we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was all worth it.
Yeah, it was, and
Do
then they
you?
see the photos and go, oh, okay, wow, I can't wait to play it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, are you? Let's talk maybe about the club. So, like, why do clubs reach out to you? Like, what are the various reasons why they reach out to you to come on site to take photos? Like, what's their rationale for that? Obviously they pay you to come out, you take photos. There's a whole bunch of work you do with the superintendent to plan. Like, why is it worth it for the club?
I think they're crazy. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll edit that
Um,
one out. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
um, I don't think, I'm going to do like from Dallas and shooting Brook Hollow, Dallas, and it's one of the better courses in that area. And they reached out because they've seen my work. They've seen on social media. Um, just liked it. They said, "Wow, we've seen what you did on other courses. Can you do that here or something similar?" They also had a bunch of members, I guess, that knew me or bought some prints from me. So that's one of the reasons, they reached out. Some of them I've worked with over time, but I just, I guess they appreciate uh, the work I've done at some other places, and it resonated with them.
Hmm.
Uh, and they need to, with Ocean Forest. I've worked with them before, and they just did this, um, not really renovations, a refresh, more like a refresh, and so they wanted new imagery, the refresh. So they had me come. Um, yeah, I guess they just like my work
Hmm.
done in the past in certain places.
Sure. And I imagine that, so you kind of mentioned a couple reasons. One is, it almost kind of goes back to your first photographs, right? Which is just like, I like this club. I'm a member here. I want photographs of it so I can put it on my wall and I can have the memory distilled into a frame. I imagine that some is, marketing angle, like we want golfers to come here. Is it do you have a sense, is it pretty evenly split between public and private? Because like on the public side, obviously they're trying to fill tee sheets, they're trying to get people out to the course. Same with resorts, they're trying to do F&B and rooms. Private clubs, some of it maybe is desire, but there's also really long wait lists at every private club. So like, is it roughly split? Is it one or the other, or sort of like the types of clubs that are reaching out to you?
I would have to say it's mostly private clubs.
Mm.
Some resorts, if I look at what I've done, this year, I did some shoots in Florida, private courses. Um, then I went back to Florida, a couple more private courses. I was, in, a few weeks ago, East Lake, you know, it's Riviera, Pasatiempo's kind of semi-private.
Hmm.
This Ocean Forest is private.
Hmm.
They're mostly private. Some resort, um, yeah, but I'd say it's mostly private.
Got
Of
it.
course,
So it's almost like it's almost less for them, at least, I imagine. Maybe differently, but it's less about like the direct marketing. You see a photo, you book a tea time because you can't, and it's more of this sort of storytelling. Like, and what's so important about some of the historic clubs? A lot of the ones that you mentioned on Long Island, or all the ones that you've been to. I mean, so much about building an identity is
yep,
around how people feel about this specific place. I mean, I think about Tree Farm a lot. You mentioned Aiken earlier, and Zach has done such a good job about building this sort of following of that golf course. And obviously, initially they needed to raise money, and then they needed some founding members, and then, well, now you can't join, because there's a wait list and it's too expensive. But there is this just sort of, I don't think it's a negative thing, but there's this like, there has to be this desire for these private clubs to make people want to play there, even if they know that they can't,
yeah,
because that's what makes them elite. Elite, like in a world class way, not like a social, economic way.
yeah.
Um, so, what would your advice be if, let's say, uh, obviously clubs reach out to you all the time. So, in the next, let's say, year, a new club is opening up. What would your advice, or like kind of what's that initial call look like? You mentioned all the planning that goes into it, but let's say what they're really trying to do is say, we want for people to notice us, right? We want to be in the conversation of world class golf clubs, and we want to portray our club in a way that makes people think that it's beautiful or fun to play or blah blah blah, whatever they're looking for. What sort of advice would you give them when they reach out to you?
Mm. So I think that I mean, actually, there's a course um, that I've been talking to that just deciding, like when do they want me to, first of all, when to do this and do they actually, the guy, I think he's just deciding, do I really need this? Right.
Yeah, I
And
can
then,
take pictures on my phone and put it on the
which
website.
is a legit question. Like,
Yeah.
why? So, which I guess is, one of the questions I would ask is, why do this?
Hmm.
What purpose? What are you going to like? What is the photography for? What's your intent with it? I would ask him that. What are you going to use it for? Because that kind of shapes everything else. Like, okay, um, I don't know. We're gonna just nice to have, okay. Um, but if they say, well, I would ask them that why, what purpose are you going to use it for your website? You're going to use it for social media. You're going to do it for editorial purposes, just content, like some courses need it for, they have outings, they do outings, and lots of times the outings will send out a notice or a brochure. They need a photo of the golf course. So I just yeah, like it gets them thinking about how am I going to use this stuff. Versus because lots of time people, well, yeah, we'd like to have all 18 holes photographed, video of all 18 holes. And so like great, but stop, hang on. What what for? I mean, it's a lot of time and money to spend on something you may not use. I mean,
Hmm.
do you really video of every hole? I'm not saying you don't, but put it on the website and show a video of every hole on your website. And
Hmm.
then the question is somebody going to actually watch it?
Hmm.
Go through and watch video of every all 18 holes and look photos. People's attention span now is not great. So, if you don't catch them,
Hmm.
in the couple seconds, they're gone off to something else.
Yep.
Unless they're thinking, okay, I'm thinking about joining this place or I'm really want to go play here, they may spend some more time.
Hmm.
But so this is the one question I would just say, for what purpose? Why are you going to use, what are you going to use this for?
Yeah.
Um, and
I
I
think it's
think
an
that,
important question. I mean, it's so much about like in my line of work, I get a lot of people who are like, I want to build an app. I work from, consumer technology. And that's always my first question too. Like, why? Like, number one is it's hard. Number two, it's hard to get people to download apps. Number three, it's hard to get people to use them more than once. Like, do you really need that? Or is there something else, other problem that you're trying to solve? Right. And I think you, in many ways, are, part of, a steward for the identity of these clubs. We talked to Seth McWhorter a couple episodes ago about, the visual identity of a brand of a golf course and the logo, and approaches it from a very similar angle, right? Which is like deeply understanding the place, the people, what makes it special. And then to your point, if you have one shot to look at a golf course logo and feel something and want to learn more or want to play it, it's really no different than scrolling through your Instagram feed and looking at a golf course and saying like, all right, I'm adding that to my bucket list now. We talked to GMs of golf courses last week, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like what we have to make the right decisions because number one, there is a lot of competition. There's competition for attention. There's competition for people's money. There's competition for people's memberships. And we have to stand out. But every little decision that we make has to make that golf course or that club special, right? And I think that's why it's such a good question because I'm sure a lot of people reach out and are like, I don't know, we're building a website, or I don't know, we're sending out a brochure, or I don't know, like other clubs do it. But especially if they're going to reach out to you, right? Instead of like their nephew or someone, like they're reaching out to
yeah,
the best, golf course photographer in the world, they better have a damn good reason to do so, right? So I think that's it could be, and you do all this mostly yourself, right? Like you don't have other people who are going out. Like this is a craft that you do, and it's something that needs to be intentional.
yeah. A friend who's a consultant to some, pretty big companies.
Mhm.
And, we were talking one time. He said, everything is a communication. What do you mean by that?
Sounds
He
like
goes,
something a consultant would say.
yeah. He goes, your facial expressions.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I'm not just talking what you say,
Yeah.
the photos you share, the way you act,
Mm-hmm.
your body language, the clothes you wear,
Mm-hmm.
um, the hat you wear,
Mm-hmm.
you know, your logo.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes, what are you trying to communicate?
Mm-hmm.
That basically we said, what are you trying to communicate?
Mm-hmm.
Because people will always get that communication.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like one of those, I think there's a cliche that like even a non-decision is a decision. Like all that communication can happen unintentionally as well, right? And I think like
Yeah.
getting it wrong or not thinking enough about it certainly still has an impact on like you go to a golf website and like if they don't care, we talked about this with the logo, is like if a golf course doesn't care about the logo, what else do they not care about? Do they not care about the food? Do they not care about the hospitality? Do they not care about the greens? Do they not care about the mowers? Like, that it's just details matter, especially in a luxury sort of disposable income industry that it's not like bread and water, it's golf, and the details matter because people could spend their time doing something else. So I want to maybe wrap up here and just ask you some kind of rapid fire questions. One is what's
The
just
rep our hat.
what's your just all time favorite course to shoot?
Favorite course to shoot.
Yeah.
Wow, good question. You know, um, I would say there's probably a handful, but Royal County down in Ireland.
Okay.
And it actually happens to be one of my favorite golf courses, but it's also one of my favorite places to shoot.
Okay. And I was going to ask, is that answer different for your favorite golf course to play? Like, what golf course could you just play every day?
Fisher's Island.
Okay. Good. That's a good answer. I haven't been out there, but photographs look great.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah, it's pretty special.
Yeah. What's the hardest in your experience, the hardest golf course to shoot? Like to make it look great?
Flat ones
Mm.
with no trees.
Yeah, I can
Uh,
imagine. Yeah.
Whatever they are, it's flat ones with no trees.
Okay.
But yeah,
Um,
you can. It's just that you got a very small window to do it.
sure, sure. You got to use the elements.
You
What's
got to
what
timing is crucial.
for sure. What's a golf course that's on your bucket list to shoot that you haven't shot yet?
Tara Edie.
Okay. Yeah, because
And
you have done some in that part of the world, right? At least.
actually, no, I haven't been
Okay.
down. I
Okay.
just that whole, all those the new courses down there, and also we go to the sand belt down there and be kind of, and then in this country, sand hills,
Okay.
not sand hills yet.
Yeah. That's I like that bucket list. I can agree with that.
Thanks.
Uh, I think you kind of touched on this, and honestly, candidly, this is kind of a stupid question, I think, but sunrise or sunset, which, if you had to pick one, which is better for shooting? I'm sure this is why it's a stupid question, because I'm sure the
Yeah.
answer is like, I imagine,
Wow.
but
Um, I don't know if I have one. Sometimes it just depends where you are.
Mhm.
Here, this the sun rises have been, even though it's been challenging because of the clouds, when the sun comes out, it's been really cool.
Okay.
Got some fog, low level fog yesterday and cool clouds. So it just depends.
Sure.
You know,
What,
sunrise is more challenging because you got to coordinate with the superintendent.
mm,
Sunset because you deal with the golf. But
mm,
you
yeah,
know,
as not a morning person myself, I'd probably pick sunset, but also
I love
not a
being
good,
out in the morning early. First thing. We were out by the this morning. I was going to shoot the 18th hole from
mm,
behind, looking back, almost towards the sun, and there was this little kind of marshy area to the right of the hole, and there was a little pond. There was a little baby alligator in there, which is kind of cool. I mean, I don't know. He was maybe 3 feet long.
yeah. And do you capture stuff like that too? Like just
Yeah,
take a
yeah,
picture of it because you want it?
yeah. My
What's your
wife is.
favorite to kind of take you back to your bedroom where you put all those photos on the walls that you took? It could be one of those or it could be anything else you've done. But if, let's say, in your house right now, you can print out one photo that you've taken, and you could put that one on the wall, which one would you put? What's your favorite?
Favorite one I could put. It would probably, and it's already on my wall. It's a photo I took of the fifth hole at Bandon Dunes. It was sunrise, and it was foggy, misty morning, and the fog was kind of rolling up the bank. It was, yeah, it was, yeah, really nice. Yeah, it's. I mean, I took it about 4 or 5 years ago, but it's still to this day. I think it's my favorite shot.
Great. And then, kind of last question, more of a selfish one, but who's someone that you think we should have on the podcast next? You know, you kind of get a feel for what we're trying to do here. Number
Yeah,
one, it has to be someone who would say yes, but who's something that you think that we should reach out to have on a future episode?
it's good. Did you say you had golf course architects on?
We haven't had one yet.
I think Andrew Green would be a very interesting guy to have on there.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
cool. Yeah, he, I've definitely
He
seen other
he,
interviews he's done.
he Tyler
Hmm.
Tyler, up and coming, really young up and coming architect. That's really interesting. Both of them guys.
I'll shoot him a cold email and see if I can get a
I think
response.
also Connor Lewis. You know, Connor Lewis
Mm,
is the head of the uh, golf historians. He's a golf historian. Really, I think he'd be interesting. I don't know how much you can help clubs, but he's
yeah,
interesting.
I would love to talk. I mean, I studied history in school, so I would love to talk to a historian because I tend to sort of think that way. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I think kind of as we wrap here, this was fascinating. Thank you for taking the
Oh
time.
yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
Appreciate
and I think like one of my big takeaways is it's such a similar thread across these conversations of just like it's really hard to build a club that people care about, and every decision that you make matters, whether that be the logo, the
it. Yeah.
hospitality, the photography, and so I think that's like a key takeaway is just like that. And I'm not saying that we're unintentional, like it's not like we're just like floating around, but just like really thinking about these decisions and how they sort of come across. You talked about that, like, you know, what did your friend say? The, you know, as far as the communication and how everything is communication. Um, but yeah, just thank you very much. I know you're busy, so I appreciate the
Oh yeah.
time.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And so the best place for people to kind of either get in touch or to see your work, you have your website, which is a great hang anyway. People should go to your website. It's evanschillerphotography.com. And then if you're listening to this and you're not following Evan_Schiller_photography on Instagram, I highly recommend. You will spend a good hour just scrolling through and, oh, I've played there, or I want to play there, or I'm saving that. I think I have, you know, probably half of your feed bookmarked at this point.
Very cool.
So yeah, so thanks for taking the time and for listening.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed it, you know, like, subscribe, share it with someone who loves the game. I think there's a lot of people out there who've either seen Evan's work or should see Evan's work, and I think they'd enjoy this conversation very much. And you can always learn more about, you know, our club or Spey Bay or Hillcrest. Visit links.golf, or you can pop in our Discord, and we'd love to have you join us. So yeah, Evan, really, really appreciate it, and thanks for taking the time.
Oh yeah. Thanks for being on. This is really great. Loved it.
So, see you later.